What a powerful film. Thank you all for coming here today and watch it with us here at Maailmankylässä Festival. First, warm welcome from Unicef and from me as well. My name is Katriina Pajari. I'm a journalist. I work for newspaper Helsingin Sanomat. I lead the foreign correspondence team. In my work, I follow sad stories from all around the world every day. I travel a lot for work. I've seen many conflict areas around the world. I've been in Asia and recently in Ukraine. But there's one special place where I've never been, and that's Gaza. Us journalists haven't had access there for many years. So many people in the world are suffering right now. We have to fight to keep ourselves in focus of that. Even when it feels far away, we cannot look away. Luckily, we still have people who keep on telling stories for us, keep on going these places. And today we are lucky to have one of them with us here today. Please welcome James Elder, Unicef Global Spokesperson. Yeah. Please sit down. It's great to have you here tonight, James.
Thanks, Katriina. Very nice to be here. Hi, everyone.
James, you have spent years of speaking for children living through wars and disasters. You've met children in many crisis areas around the world. And just in this spring, you've been in Gaza, Lebanon, and the West Bank. I was advised not to call you the UNICEF superstar, but for many people that's probably what you are. But as your official title is the UNICEF Global Spokesperson. So first, can you tell us a little bit what you do and what you've been doing recently?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Katriina. So my job very much is it's a privileged job. It's to go to some of the toughest places in the world, but to sit and listen to people and families and to tell their stories. Things have certainly, I think the last 5 years, have gotten worse pretty much everywhere, with the obvious Ukraines and Gazas, though now that's fallen off the radar. The ceasefire was very successful in taking that away from people's attention, sadly. Sudan's and so on as well. So really it is just to sit and listen to people and then try and sort of, rebuild empathy amongst understanding that some people care hugely and there's probably a little bit of a vicarious trauma for those people. I'm very concerned about, young people in their 20s, how much of this they're seeing, how much hypocrisy on a global stage they're seeing. But at the same time, a lot of people are turning away, and that matters. And for me, most recently, I was in Lebanon and the West Bank. Lebanon, we talk of impunity and what it means, and what it means in Gaza was seeing unprecedented attacks on children and healthcare workers, and everyone talking about, this idea of impunity. And then if it's unchecked, then you see it in Lebanon, and you suddenly see, 300 airstrikes in the space of a day, 33 children killed in 5 minutes, 100 health workers killed in the space of a month. That's what impunity is. It means something. It doesn't have a finite end. And then the West Bank, which we can talk to as well, which is just another layer of that brutal suffering that Palestinians are enduring.
How do people react when you get close and ask what they are doing, how they are feeling today? Are they eager to tell their stories, or are they getting tired? Look,
Palestinians have an immense education rate, immense literacy rate. So there is something very unusual in a place whereby, I can walk through a hospital, okay, and these are immense war zones, whereby everywhere you turn, 360 degrees, you are seeing the wounds of war, and devastating what bombs and shrapnel do to children. It's the burns. I didn't know there was such a thing as 4th-degree burns. It's shrapnel's designed to rip through concrete, what it does to a child's body and so on. The amputations, and then the lack of medical care. So, and at times you're in Gaza as well, and you're not just seeing these wounds on children, you're hearing them because of all the denials into Gaza. One of the things was painkillers. And then you sit and talk to families, and there's a sameness to a lot of what's happened. It's been 1 o'clock in the morning, families are asleep, and it was an airstrike or it was a quadcopter. But every single person's story is different, both because everyone's story is different, but also because that education rate is so high, because their literacy is so high, there's an articulation in sharing that story. So, yeah, people still want to tell their stories. Having said that, I've been in Gaza 7 times in the last 2.5 years, and I remember maybe early 2025, so a long time ago, and seeing a doctor outside Al-Aqsa Hospital, the hospital that got struck there, and explaining what I was doing. And he said, no, I know what you're doing. I've seen your stuff. You're trying to share what's happening and you're trying to tell the world. He said, but how much more evidence do people need? And that was early 2025, and here we are. We've had 6 months of a ceasefire where 230 children have been killed. A child is killed in Gaza every day on average in the last 6 months. That's a ceasefire. 60 or 59 were killed or injured in the last week in Lebanon. So Palestinians, Lebanese, those in the West Bank are eager to tell their story, but as a young university 4th-year English graduate said to me in Gaza, I was trying to explain to her that people around the world, the people from, Helsinki to Sydney were protesting around what was happening, and she said, James, we see that, but we know that international humanitarian law doesn't apply to us. I thought, wow, for someone who's 24 to even know there's such a thing as international humanitarian law, but also know how much it's been denied to Palestinians was kind of a double blow.
Yeah. James is a former journalist. In many ways, he still does the same work. He travels to the places where most of us don't have access and helps bring those stories to the world. James, you've said you visited Gaza many times. When you watched this documentary film, did it feel familiar? Did it match with the things you've seen yourself?
Yeah, what a good question, Catherine. Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, on one hand, Dr. Yunus still hasn't seen his daughters. I think people forget that part, whether it's Ukraine. I was in Ukraine just after the war started and watching those tens of thousands of mums and children leaving and, tears with husbands standing on train stations, and those Palestinians who could get out pretty much in the first 6 months, those who did. And there he is, a dad, a grandfather. It's just, Unicef is obviously all about the children, but it's just no way for people in the final chapter of their life to be denied, seeing grandkids again. So seeing Dr. Yunus and knowing that was shot 18 months ago. He still hasn't seen that. Farouz is just one of the more extraordinary people you'll encounter. But yes, since then, of course, her home's been destroyed. She's still caring for her mum. Maybe, if anything, because, of course, Unicef made that to try and reach all audiences. But as I say, when you're in a hospital, I mean, if I just go back to the very first time I was in Gaza, which was November 2023, and a bus came from the north with wounded children and it had been delayed by the Israelis for a long time, letting these children come. And I got on the bus, and just this smell, which never leaves you. And I then did research into what was in the smell. Is basically chemicals and remnants of bombs and burning flesh. And I can still see the bus, but there were just 2 kids who I can still see. And one was like a 12-year-old boy who was just stunned. All the laws of his world had been broken, and just with shrapnel and burns on his face. And then a little girl, I don't know, she was less than 10, but her whole head was kind of wrapped. And at that point, and then 18 months later, I was thinking, everything, you'd leave Gaza, and everything you'd be told, there was a justification for it. What I saw in Gaza, 360 degrees every day, just didn't compute with there was always a justification for what was happening in Gaza. It was political, it was strategic, or sometimes it was even moral. And so that resonates because, UNICEF and many others, we warned of that. We warned that, like that film, that if you deny sanitation and you devastate like that, and you deny medicines and vaccines, then you'll have a disease outbreak. We weren't listened to, and we saw polio. We warned that the level of pure indiscriminate attacks in heavy residential areas, if that's allowed to continue, you'll see thousands of children killed. Well, we've seen tens of thousands of children killed. I mean, there's been 1,000 babies who didn't make it to the age of 1. So I've given up on numbers because they don't impact enough. And we warned that if you allow Israel to deny food aid over a long period of time, you'll have famine. And we had famine. So now we're at a point during a ceasefire, Katerina, where we're warning again because summer's coming. Sanitation's never been worse. You have another polio outbreak or a cholera outbreak because people are still denied the dignity of a home. You can't get containers in there and so on. So yes, it resonated, but somehow, of course, it's not worse in Gaza now. The frequency of bombing hasn't stopped, but that's a very, very dark scale.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that. Like, the film was made 2 years ago, so is there something which is really different nowadays if you were there in January?
Yeah, I mean, Palestinians hold on to hope. It's almost, as one of them said, it's almost their blind spot. They're well aware of the political realities of where they live, but it's all they've got. What's changed in the positive, without a doubt, is education. Our team, every Unicef's blessing is our breadth of our mandate. It's water, it's sanitation, it's child protection, it's trauma, so it's counselling, it's education. And because it's such an important thing for Palestinians to have one of the highest literacy rates in the world, that was such a critical thing to get going again in any capacity. So, 700,000 children who hadn't seen a classroom for 2 years. And if you were 10 years old, you lived through COVID as well for 2 years. So making that happen was immense. But again, it's only a third of children right now. The sanitation has been, that we're still denied so many things. I think Gaza will be a time where, I think grandkids will ask their grandparents, what they did during that time, and we are still at that moment. Yes, it's about funding, but it's very much about keeping eyes on Gaza. I mean, we get to really quite dark. Now if you look at Gaza, it's not in the news, but if you search it, you'll see stories because there's a rodent infestation because sanitation was destroyed and people are still in tents. You have to remember, with people in Gaza had homes, they had air conditioning, people had holiday homes. To be in a tent for 2.5 years, the privacy, the sanitation, the dignity, and now all of a sudden there's rodents, so that's the new horror story. But so things have in the slightest areas improved, but the world's attention has been diverted. And as I say, Katharina, I don't know, when you limit the severity of airstrikes and only a child is killed every day, I think we need new words for these things. And same, as I say, with things like impunity. Impunity is suddenly, it's no longer a failure of the system. Impunity's become the system, and it didn't need to be that way. It's been allowed to happen. Everyone's been, this film was made 18 months ago. Everyone's social media showed that. It's been allowed to happen because those with leverage, those with voice chose not to use it. And I wish I was saying it was, but it's not. It was and it remains one of the darkest spots in modern human rights.
Well, before coming here, you also went to West Bank. Let's talk about that next. Violence against children has increased. Many schools are closed. Many health services are damaged or no longer working. What you would like us to know about that? What we should understand about the situation in the West Bank?
Gosh, maybe the best way to explain the West Bank is, everyone says the West Bank is complex because it goes back to 1948 and displacement and so on. When you see the level of violence from settlers on families, on schools, on destroying water systems, it's not complicated at all. So to give a simple sense, if I just talk about a single family I met, because this is now across the West Bank now, on one hand I feel silly to sound so outraged now because it's been going on for a long time, but it's getting a lot worse now, and there is, again, there's a system to it. These are not just one-off moments. This is part of a larger policy, if you will. So a single family I met, and I was meeting children who are detained. We should talk of that. There are hundreds of children in detention, Palestinian children in detention. Half of them are under something called administrative detention, which means they get detained and there's no charge. All the conditions, all the children have the similar things. All will show you the scars of the prison marks. All will talk about being woken with stun grenades, about the dogs, about the noise, about how much weight they lose. These are children, right? These are 14 and 15-year-olds. Administrative detention, no charge needed. It's no other Western democracy does that. But to go to this one family, Katharina, they'd live there forever, and they talk about a village, but often a village is big homes. And anyway, settlers set themselves up, then they get supported by the Israeli forces, then they start to expand, and over time, and then they just keep threatening to try and get people to move. So they'll threaten kids going to school, and eventually it gets very violent. And in this case, they destroyed the homes about 9 months ago. They came through over a period of time and destroyed the homes. The bulldozers came through as well, so that's part of the state apparatus. And then 2 months later, the families were all sleeping outdoors. and settlers came in at about 11 p.m. And so I spoke to a little boy who was 8 years old. He got hospitalised because he got a club to the head, but his mum had both her arms broken because she was putting her arms across her 4-month-old baby. So she put her arms between the club and her baby. That's not unusual, right? 3 weeks ago, a couple of kids were killed at school when settlers attacked. So these things are off the world's radar, and I don't quite know why. But it's not just impunity almost now in the West Bank, it's enthusiastic impunity. And for Palestinians, it's just terrifying. They have nowhere else to go. You know, it's something, I mean, it's not just the children. You see, like, when you see olive trees, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who has better understanding than I, but I don't think they really die. Right? They live for thousands of years because their roots just expand and they pop up again. And then you just see like an entire field where they've just been bulldozed. And you think, gosh, that's the livelihood, that's your labour, that's your love, that's your culture, and it's happening everywhere and increasingly.
Yeah, every day we read the news from Middle East, which are devastating and heartbreaking, and very often it's the children who suffer the most. Thousands of children have been hurt, many have lost their lives. People live under constant danger, aid is limited, and the suffering is everywhere. Do you see Gaza as a part of bigger global crisis for children?
Yes, I think without a doubt, I think that, things like international humanitarian law and the laws of war, they were set up, as everyone here knows, they were set up after World War II as a bare minimum during wartime to protect people. They are the floor in terms of what we're meant to do for kids. They're not the ceiling, and the level of disregard it will come at a real cost. And as I say, you only had to jump in the last 2 months to see what's happened in Lebanon. So I think allowing that level of impunity is terribly dangerous. The way that the United Nations has been attacked, both in terms of reputation but also on the ground, attacking aid workers and then trying to weaponise humanitarian aid, who delivers aid, is terribly dangerous. The whole point is that it doesn't matter which side you find yourself stuck on. You get humanitarian aid, medicine, water, vaccines, food to women and kids, anyone. That was politicised. Very, very much so. And we live at a time that, if I only got here yesterday, but if I understand the news, the drone over Helsinki recently, we live at a time of drone warfare being in the very beginnings. And it's not just states that have unlimited access to drones, it's non-state actors. And that should worry people enormously. If we are discarding international humanitarian law and there is a massive rise in drones, and that's a horrific collision for kids.
I would like to keep on talking about that. What does it tell about the world? Like the human aid, the human aid limitation, humanitarian aid limits have become more political. So how do you see that? Is it the new situation, common situation around the world at the moment?
The politics of
the aid has become more political.
Yeah, I don't know if it's yes, because we sorry, but it's such a depressing conversation, but we have this. So we have a whole collision on a child's body of these wars that aren't stopping, of as you say, the politicisation of aid, where it's very, very clear. It's very, very clear what humanitarian aid is meant to do. It's people like Dr. Yunus and Farouz. At the same time, we have a funding crisis like we've never seen before. Not since the advent of the United Nations or any other, the Red Cross or anyone else since World War II. And people just don't understand that. When you had the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, the banks were bailed out. No one is bailing out the children. So when I'm in Sudan and I meet a nurse who's worked for 6 months without a salary, she's just got no idea why the rug's been pulled out from under her. Or if I'm in Haiti and there's a paediatrician who carries a gun because she walks through, gang warfare areas to get to her malnutrition centre, but suddenly she's short of that magical therapeutic food for malnourished babies because there's a funding crisis, she hasn't got a clue. And nor should she, because the numbers we are talking about are tiny. They are tiny. I don't want to use particular examples because they probably fit everywhere. I think Unicef and all aid agencies have a key job to show people where their money's going. Absolutely, everyone's dealing with tough times, everyone has a funding crisis, everyone's got cost of living crises. But to use a single example, because I think it holds in other Western nations, and the funding crisis started in the United States. Sadly, it then bled into major European nations as well. But there is a stat that the average American believes that they give around $24 out of every 100 to foreign aid. They think about $24 out of every 100. It's 24 cents, right? So I think, and yet even if you look at the right, people of right of centre, the vast majority of them think they should be supporting, children, healthcare, all these things. And so somehow, where I've been out there trying to tell the stories of these heroic people, because yes, UNICEF is on the front line, but Ferouz is on the front line. Mums and dads are on the front line, and mums and dads don't quite understand why this incredible moment of need, when we're not talking large sums of money, particularly when we talk about Middle Eastern wars and wars with Iran, they just don't understand why the world has turned away, both in terms of attention, human rights, and then funding.
That's exactly. I think many people here tonight feel really deeply about the suffering of the children. I would like to end this discussion with a question of hope. What can ordinary people do? Is there something, and maybe more importantly, do we still have hope? How do you see the situation?
Yes, absolutely, because I see young people all the time who are following these things relentlessly, and I think it's immense. And as I say, it really does worry me if you're a young person and you saw the world's response to Ukraine, and then you saw the complete hypocrisy with Gaza and with Lebanon, and at the same time they're well aware of a climate crisis that's been sidelined or a mental health crisis. But I think. Firstly, it's what you don't do. Don't allow the statistics to numb you. There are those human stories behind every single one. Every single one of those does. I think demand better. People should demand better all the time from their media, from their elected officials, from their friends. Have the conversation when friends try to justify, well, it's complicated, the killing of 20,000 children in Gaza. Have a gentle conversation to try and see their point of view and to bring to bring human stories and evidence to them. And I think keep that pressure on. Keep pressure on those people with leverage. Keep pressure on politicians, or keep pressure on the powerful. The perpetrators of all these things are relying on exhaustion and silence to try and win over. But history will show us that you prevail when you don't allow both those things to happen.
Thank you, James, for sharing all your experience and thoughts with us tonight. I think many of us will live with the feelings that stay with us for a long time. Thank you all for being here tonight. We will now continue the discussion in the lobby area, where you can ask James questions and come to say hi. And thank you again for coming. And James, thank you for all the work you do. We see you all in the lobby.
Super, thanks, Katarina. Thank you.